What's the most efficient way to run your company? On the next Language of Business, we'll talk operations and the 3 T's: telecom, top-line energy management, and tapas. Continuous business improvement for startups and established ventures. The Language of Business.
This is The Language of Business with Greg Stoller.
Are you a book-smart executive? Is your brilliant business plan collecting dust? If you haven't gotten the memo, it's all about effective implementation. There's often a big difference between business on paper and how it is practiced in reality. Case in point, when I was studying hotel management in college and later working at the Imperial Hotel in Tokyo, I was constantly reminded of the phrase, the last 3 feet, or closing the distance between hotel personnel and the guests. Meanwhile, the executives in the back office were 30 miles away. My first guest is Craig Sanders, a business leader with a consistent track record of successfully aiding organizations in transition. Craig, welcome to The Language of Business.
Thank you, Greg.
So many people erroneously consider operations or logistics to be a catch-all phrase for anything done outside of the front office. With so much of your career spent in this area, I'm interested to hear how you would define this term.
Well, most of my career has been in a tech field service environment. So in that environment would include inventory management, installation, customer care, and also the network operating center, which operates on a 24/7 basis.
And geographically, where were all of these stints spent?
We've had a nationwide operations. They've been in Florida several times, out of Kansas City, and then on the West Coast.
So this isn't something that was defined to a certain geography or something that operations would differ from location to location?
No. Even if it was a operation that had multiple locations, like it was in 40 states, but it was headquartered out of Miami, this still is a field service organization.
And if you had to categorize your corporate turnaround victories over the years into different buckets,
right,
how large would the one be on operational success?
Well, I've had 8 turnarounds, and there's been operational issues in every one of them. And that's not to say that there weren't other issues in other parts of the company. But if you think about it, operations usually has the largest number of employees, vehicles, and therefore the expenses. So if that's not running efficiently, then you've got trouble in the company. And what we've done to be successful is we put in a quality service strategy that includes the vision, metrics to manage it, consistent follow-up, and then tie that to year-end performance.
And what would you say the difference is between strategy and tactics when it comes to operations?
A tactic would be more on the day-to-day. You're answering the phone in a certain period of time. That's a tactic that supports your overall strategy.
Yep.
But you've got to have a strategy. And by the way, even though we defined it as the biggest part of the company's operations, anything that touches a customer should be an element of the overall strategy.
But how and when would you draw the line between good logistical efficiency versus simply good people or process management?
Well, you've always got to have good people. But let me give you an example of a vision statement that we put in. And I use vision maybe different than somebody else. To me, a vision is where you want to be down the road in 3 to 5 years, not where you are now.
Okay.
So you've got to grow to that.
Yeah.
And so one such strategy was to deliver quality carrier service in the Southeast. The Southeast is important because this company had had national aspirations before the new team was brought in.
Sure. And
now quality is a subjective term. What you may think is good quality may not be good quality to me without standards. And so since we're a network organization, you have to be reliable. And since you're a service organization, you have to be responsive. So taking it and revising it would be to deliver reliable and responsive carrier solutions in the Southeast. And then you lay your metrics against that. This strategy works because in one location, we reduce customer churn 41% on a year-over-year basis.
And customer churn is customers leaving, going with another carrier?
That's correct. And so when you reduce it 41%, you can imagine that your customer base increases, and it was the first year the customer base grew in 3 years.
You're watching The Language of Business. I'm Greg Stoller, and my guest is Craig Sanders, a managing director specializing in turnarounds and a mentor to C-Level Interim Executives. I know you've served 4 years as a U.S. Army officer, including service as a company commander and as a pilot. How has your military training and background affected your ability to positively manage companies operationally?
Well, since I started in the military, you have to give credit to the fact that my style must be based on being able to delegate, lead, assign accountability, plan, strong planning in the military, and also attention to detail. Now, in one situation, my second day in the company, it was a large company, I was given a company-wide task force to be in the market within 90 days. And if we didn't, then it was a regulatory window, and if we didn't, we were locked out. So we put the plan together, but the training department said it'll take 6 months to train everybody. Well, that just wasn't going to work, so we changed the name of the game.
Right.
Set up what you probably would call a war room, brought in the subject matter experts.
But different than the war room you were formerly associated with, right?
Let's say a tactical room.
Right.
So you bring in the subject matter experts.
Right.
And then the salesman would call in with the proposal templates. We also control the pricing, and by the end of the day, we could FedEx out to the salesman a formal proposal for him to deliver the next day.
And you're able to keep the regulators happy, but also have your own metrics in place to say we did it within a 6-month period.
Well, even better than that. We obtained over 110 million in 90 days. So that was a technique that we used that I would draw on the military.
I happen to think that stuff is terrific, but my next question is then why do so many executives seemingly disregard operations, opting instead to focus on the sexier areas of corporate strategy and marketing?
It's because it's intoxicating. Everybody gets excited. The CEO is going around talking to other people about buying their company. The employees, the executives and the employees also, once they find out, are pleased that the company is going to grow. There may be more opportunities for them. And so that part is the intoxicating part. Where they get into trouble is on the integration side. And if they don't move quickly to integrate the two entities, they'll end up with 2 customer care systems, 2 accounting systems, and 2 IT systems.
And so a lot of redundancy, but not the good sort of redundancy.
Well, then the CEO and the board approved the 3rd acquisition. So now you're caught out in the open. You're not prepared for it, and so that 3rd acquisition will be very troublesome.
Craig, you've come from the military. You obviously did this for multiple years, managing people and processes. You've used this example in terms of carriers in the Southeast. Do you think there's a science, like other management disciplines, the 4 Ps and the 5 Cs of marketing or stuff of that ilk, to effectively implementing operations, or is it really done by gut feel?
Well, first of all, it takes a while to learn for a young person to learn to read his gut. At least it took me a while. To lead the organization, they have to know where you're going. And this is where the strategy comes in and the vision. And I've talked to you before about to deliver reliable and responsive carrier solutions in the Southeast. But I haven't mentioned any of the metrics, which is a very important element of it. Reliability in a network organization is the 5 nines. 99.999% of the time, that network better be up. And on the responsiveness side, since you're a service organization, you want the departments to commit, the customer care, the network operating center, and even the receptionist to commit to answering the phone in 3 rings or less.
So this is like 6 Sigma on steroids, if it has to be the 5 nines. Right.
I wouldn't go that far, but the 5 nines is very strong.
Right.
In fact, I can't say that we've achieved 5 nines on a year-to-date basis. Some months we were 100, but on a year-to-date basis, we were 4 nines in the 6.
Sure.
So, which is still very high standards. But I also want to show, go ahead, just one more point. The billing department commits to getting the invoices out in 5 days or less. And then the regulatory department, if we were to ever have a complaint come in from the Public Utility Commission, would commit to having that resolved in 3 days or less. So you see on a strategic basis, it's more than just operations. Anything
it's
that touches
full integration.
It's a full, you're utilizing the entire company to provide excellent service.
So you mentioned before that young people might take a while to have their gut feel get to where they need to be. When you're reviewing a resume, how do you measure someone's likely success in the operational area?
When we post a position, we know what the specifications are of what we're looking for. And since we're in a field service organization, we would probably look for somebody with a similar background and maybe a similar sized organization. The risk would be less there if he or she had those skills. But if they were coming from a manufacturing environment or a low-tech service environment, I think the risk would be higher. Now, the way we try to reduce the risk is that, let's say you were the candidate. So let's have a candid conversation, because if you, Greg, see us wrong and don't see us for what we really are, our culture, our warts, etc., and you're just an anxious candidate, then one of us is going to make a mistake. And we need to also see you for what you really are. So let's just have a candid conversation between the two of us, because if you don't see us, then after you join, the smile's going to come off your face.
And after the honeymoon period ends, everybody's going to go away disappointed.
We'll both go away saying, I wish we hadn't gotten together.
Thanks, Craig. Craig Sanders, turnaround specialist and executive mentor. But what happens when your problems aren't those of an operational nature and instead involve technological challenge or process reengineering concerns? Or phrased differently, what does electronic and sheet metal fabrication, ERP systems, and lean manufacturing all have in common? We'll find out next on The Language of Business.